Hey guys, tonight we're embarking on a journey through the most misunderstood, meme-worthy, and long-lasting zombie in history, the Eastern Roman Empire, or, as your high school teacher stubbornly called it, Byzantium. Imagine Rome, but it's wearing a new hat, forgot its own birthday, and won't stop sending you chain letters in Greek. Tonight, we'll explore the real extent of the Eastern Roman Empire, not just on the map, but in the daily grind, the sweaty tunics, and the awkward moments when your neighbor is both your cousin and a Bulgarian warlord. So before you get comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this kind of late-night nerding out. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Now, go ahead and dim those lights, crank up a fan for that gentle breeze through the ruined hippodrome vibe, and slip under a blanket. So authentic, you'll think it's woven with imperial intrigue and possibly fleas. But let's get curious for a second. Have you ever wondered what it actually felt like to be a regular person in the Eastern Roman Empire? Did they know they were the leftovers of a 1,000-year-old political breakup? Was dinner just olives and passive aggression? Did people in Constantinople ever get lost trying to find the nearest bathhouse? Or was there always a cousin around the corner named Theodosius? How many emperors is too many in one century? Was your average Tuesday spent dodging invaders or arguing about theology until someone threw a pastry? If you opened your window, would you see the Bosporus? Or just your neighbor's goat doing something illegal to a vegetable cart? And now, congratulations, you've just woken up in the world's most persistent empire. It's 1042 CE. You're in Constantinople, and you've got an identity crisis, a questionable breakfast, and absolutely zero modern plumbing. Good luck. Your eyes crack open to the distant clatter of bells, chickens, and the distinct aroma of city life. That is, stale bread, sea air, and 7 kinds of incense. Congratulations. It's another day in Constantinople, capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. The city never really sleeps, but you just wish the pigeons would. The air is a curious cocktail. Salt from the Bosporus, smoke from hearths burning every flammable item known to man, and some that shouldn't be, and a heavy hint of sandalwood from the church across the street that insists on having morning service at an hour so early it feels spiteful. Your neighbor is already shouting in Greek about a goat that isn't his. Someone's dropped a pot 2 floors above you, and a stray cat is using your window ledge as its personal stage for a tragic meow opera. You're lying on what technically counts as a mattress, stuffed with straw, flattened by years of hopes, dreams, and occasional fleas. The linen? Unwashed. The draft? Eternal. Every surface in the room is either dusty, damp, or home to something vaguely sentient. Your pillow has the structural integrity of a folded towel, which it technically is. As the sun spills over the Golden Horn, the room lights up in a golden haze that could almost be poetic if it weren't highlighting just how cracked your ceiling is. You hear distant chanting echoing from Hagia Sophia, mingling with the melodic clanging of a street vendor advertising fish that are either fresh or very aggressively pickled. You're not sure. It's time to get up, which is harder than it sounds when your blanket is the one warm thing in a room built entirely of stone, bad decisions, and architectural drafts. You kick your feet out and immediately regret it. The floor is freezing. The kind of cold that travels up your spine and reminds you that heated floors won't be invented for another millennium. You consider going back to sleep but realize the bells aren't stopping. Your landlord's rooster is crowing directly into your soul. And if you don't show up to work today, someone else will steal your job and probably your shoes. As you shuffle to the window, you're greeted by the glorious sprawl of Constantinople in full swing. Boats already dot the glittering strait, hauling goods from Egypt, Italy, and places vaguely east. Monks shuffle past peddlers. Bureaucrats in rumpled cloaks hurry toward the imperial palace. Clutching scrolls like their precious family heirlooms, you spot a nobleman dramatically scolding his servant, who looks 2 complaints away from defecting to the Bulgarians. There's also a street preacher yelling about the apocalypse. Again, he's been wrong 7 times this year. You're not impressed. You splash your face with cold water from a chipped ceramic bowl, still cold, still not helping. There's no soap, of course. Just a rag, a prayer, and the hope that nobody notices your smell today. Which they will. They always do. Still, there's something oddly beautiful about this chaos. This city, this strange hybrid of Roman nostalgia and Greek efficiency, which is to say, very little efficiency at all, just keeps going. No matter the invasion, the riot, the theological scandal, or the fact that the plumbing is always a bad day away from total collapse, Constantinople endures. You, somehow, endure with it. You dress quickly. 1 tunic, 1 rope belt, no socks because socks are a luxury reserved for saints and smugglers. You grab your coin pouch, containing a heroic total of 7 bronze coins and half a crumb, and prepare yourself for the day. The pigeons continue their assault on your windowsill, undeterred by your curses. You nod to them, like old enemies with a mutual understanding. Your room is small, no bigger than a walk-in closet, with a ceiling that is perpetually on the verge of dramatic collapse. You live above 3 other families, which means you get everyone's smells and opinions for free. The walls are thin. You can hear the neighbor practicing his lyre at dawn, which would be charming if he weren't tone-deaf, and rehearsing the same tragic hymn about unpaid taxes. Floorboards complain underfoot like elders scoring your life choices. Cooking indoors is illegal in theory and socially catastrophic in practice. So you boil water on a tiny brazier on the balcony and pretend the smoke is decorative. Your chamber pot sits in a corner like a small accusing monument. Twice a week you carry it down the stairs to empty it into the gutter, timing your ritual to coincide with market distractions. Preferably during the baker's sermon or while the mayor gives one of his solemn coughs, because dignity in public is negotiable. Neighbors are unavoidable and delightfully judgmental. Upstairs snores like polite thunder. Next door runs a baby washing enterprise that involves dramatic wails and a moral lecture. The old man across the hall is either a retired soldier or an elaborate rumor. He trades advice for bread and tales of battles that may or may not have happened. Privacy is a myth. Curtains are suggestions. You learn to sleep with voices as a soundtrack, to accept unsolicited critiques of your laundry technique, and to treat awkward family reunions as weekend entertainment. The communal latrine is a social hub with questionable acoustics. Imagine benches with holes aligned like an assembly line and a shallow trough flowing beneath, carrying away both business and gossip. People exchange news, jokes, and grievances while performing their duties. The communal sponge on a stick, rinsed, supposedly, exists somewhere between hygiene and horror story. You leave lighter in body and considerably heavier in anecdote, armed with new headlines you never wanted. Storage is invention. Your possessions are few and thus sacred: a chipped ceramic cup, a wooden comb, 1 patched tunic. Everything fits into a trunk smaller than your pride. You hang herbs above the doorway to keep the pests and neighborly curses at bay. Your bed is a pallet of pallet, straw that molds itself to your spine like an apologetic friend. The idea of packing up and leaving is easy in theory. You could move in under 5 minutes, but emotional logistics are expensive, and the landlord charges in favors. There is a peculiar comfort in close quarters. At night the building breathes, creaks, whispers, a distant drip. Someone knocks softly and leaves an extra piece of bread. When storms tear tiles from roofs, the same hands that mocked your cooking help rebuild it. In plagues and shortages, neighbors exchange oil, lend blankets, and hide produce from officials who count windows like sins. Community here is messy obligation. Its survival woven from gossip, charity, and the occasional rescued pigeon. Noise is constant. Children play tag around pots, dogs bark at shadows, vendors practice their emphatic cries. Sometimes a street brawl rattles the stairwell and you find yourself applauding the choreography. Other times a solemn procession moves past carrying icons and incense, and the whole building falls silent as if holding its breath. That contrast, rowdy, reverent, is the rhythm of life. It keeps you moving, keeps you involved, keeps you human. You lock the door, though locks are optimistic. The stairwell echoes with the polite chaos of life below. You offer a nod to the pigeon on the sill. It blinks as if acknowledging your survival. For all its cracked plaster and questionable plumbing, this stacked, noisy, fragrant building is home. If the ceiling collapses tomorrow, at least you'll know which neighbor to blame first. And you'll borrow his ladder for the cleanup. You shrug, tie your belt, and step into the day, part neighbor, part survivor, entirely committed to eating something edible today. It's breakfast, and your options are bread, cheese, and whatever the street vendor swears is fresh. There's no coffee. There is, however, a heated debate about which emperor banned eggs during Lent. You eat anyway, because hunger wins. Every theological argument. Breakfast in Constantinople is a practical, uninspired affair. A ritual less about joy and more about not fainting before midday. You wake up starving, mildly confused about what day it is, and with a very real sense that if you don't eat soon, you might challenge your neighbor's goat to a duel for a fig. The food is humble, to put it gently. You've got a loaf of barley bread so dense it could double as a weapon, a suspicious wedge of cheese sweating through a piece of linen, and 2 olives that look like they've seen things. There's no butter. Butter is what barbarian herders use. You're in a civilized empire now, where fermented fish sauce is considered a reasonable condiment, and most dairy products come with a side of suspicion. If you're lucky, there's a smear of honey, expensive, yes, but worth it for that sweet burst of this is edible to soften the existential dread of chewing on last night's bread brick. And no, there's still no coffee. It won't arrive for a few more centuries. And tea is something the Persians drink to stay polite during invasions. Instead, you might sip a lukewarm barley broth or watered-down wine, depending on how much you hate yourself this morning. Hydration is important, but so is not catching something from the water cistern. So if you're drinking anything that isn't boiling or fermented, you better have an amulet, a prayer, and insurance. You take your breakfast on a tiny wooden stool outside your insula. Like most people in the city, it's less patio cafe, and more this is the only spot not currently on fire or occupied by a cat. Across the street, a vendor is hawking dates and dried figs, yelling with such theatrical passion that you assume he's auditioning for the Hippodrome. Next to him, a woman sells lentil cakes that are either delicious or deeply cursed. You'll only know once you've eaten one and evaluated your life choices 3 hours later. The streets are alive with clatter and chatter. Men argue over prices, politics, and whose cousin got conscripted. Women trade gossip with the precision of seasoned diplomats. Somewhere, someone is yelling about the Monophysites again, and you hear the words heresy and cheese used in the same sentence. You chew your bread slower. There is a moment of peace when you bite into a fig, and it doesn't immediately betray you. It's sweet, soft, and mercifully fresh. For a second, you forget the empire is embroiled in theological brawls. The aqueduct might collapse, and the tax collector lives 2 doors down. In this moment, you are simply a human eating a piece of fruit in the morning light. ignoring the faint smell of smoke and salt that clings to the city like gossip to a senator. Then someone yells, "Iconoclast!" at a passing priest, and the serenity is over. Your neighbor leans out her window with a bowl of boiled lentils and makes a face like she's just read your diary. "Still eating olives for breakfast?" she asks, as if this is the most scandalous choice you could have made. You nod solemnly. You were raised on olives and passive aggression. You finish your meal, brushing crumbs off your tunic, which is doing its best impression of a napkin. Your stomach is fullish, your mouth dry, and your soul mildly concerned that the cheese may have been alive. Still, you've done it. You've survived another morning meal in Byzantium. You stretch, breathe in the fragrant air of burning olive oil and boiled lentils, and prepare yourself for the next great challenge. Walking 10 steps without getting drawn into a debate about the Council of Chalcedon, you slip into a wrinkled tunic, tie your sandals, and pray the moths haven't devoured your good cloak. Byzantine fashion is simple, but the rules? Exhausting. Don't wear purple unless you're ready to answer some pointed questions from the secret police. Getting dressed in Constantinople is an act of subtle strategy, limited fabric, and deep social anxiety. Your choices are limited, your laundry is rare, and your neighbors are highly invested in your hemline. You reach for your tunic, a trusty, knee-length garment that hasn't seen soap in a suspiciously long time, and give it the universal shake to check for spiders, coins, or small family members. The tunic is made of wool, linen if you're lucky, and dyed with whatever didn't make you itch or explode. It's held together with stitches, a prayer, and possibly a bone button that predates your birth. You step into it like a toga for people with jobs and make sure it's belted just tight enough to imply dignity, but not so tight that you can't bend over without flashing the guy across the street. You've got options technically. If you're rich, you wear silk. If you're poor, you pretend you don't care. Everyone else wears a variation of slightly damp rectangle with holes. Cloaks are for layering, especially in the winter. And scarves? Scarves are currency. A nice scarf can get you a discount on bread or a date with a fishmonger, depending on how desperate you look. Color matters. A lot. Too much, frankly. Certain colors are reserved for specific classes or jobs. Purple? Imperial only. Wear it, and you might get mistaken for royalty, or, worse, accused of pretending to be royalty, which is a fast track to a short trial and a long fall. Red is clerical. Black is mourning or I spilled wine and gave up. White is formal, weddings, religious processions, or getting judged by your great-aunt at dinner. Your sandals are leather, roughly the consistency of beef jerky, and tied in a way that guarantees one loop will come undone exactly when you need to look impressive. You've resoled them 3 times using rope, optimism, and wax, none of which are holding up under the weight of city life. If you're barefoot, it's either a fashion statement or a personal crisis. Jewelry? Don't make me laugh. Unless you've inherited your grandfather's ring, or you're willing to trade 3 chickens and a prayer for a brass pendant, the most you'll wear is a belt with a vaguely decorative buckle, maybe a brooch, if you're feeling scandalous. Anything too shiny invites thieves, taxes, or a dinner invitation from someone who wants to marry your cousin. Hygiene is part of the outfit. In theory, you splash your face with water, rub your armpits with crushed mint, and hope no one notices that your tunic smells like old cheese and regret. Soap exists, but it's mostly for the rich and the obsessed. Everyone else uses oil, sand, or the ancient technique of not smelling worse than the guy next to you. You step outside and are immediately judged. The baker eyes your hem like he's reading a scroll. The woman selling incense mutters something about your belt being crooked, A child points at your sandals and asks if your feet are sad. You nod, because yes, they are. The imperial elite? Whole different world. Their outfits are silk, gold-threaded, and aggressively layered. You once saw a senator whose cloak was so long it required a personal slave just to carry the train behind him. That sounds impressive, until you realize they trip constantly on cobblestones and get bird poop on their embroidery like everyone else. Still, fashion is power. A well-draped cloak, a clean tunic, a pair of uncracked sandals. They're the difference between being mistaken for a beggar or a bureaucrat. You dress not just for the job you have, but the social class you want to be mistaken for in passing. And so, with your tunic mostly unstained, your sandals mostly tied, and your pride mostly intact, you begin your day. You're underdressed for a feast, overdressed for a riot, and just stylish enough to get nods from 3 neighbors and 1 goat. You, my friend, are Byzantinely chic. You dodge carts, street preachers, and a very confused goat as you make your way to work. The streets are packed, the air is loud, and someone's definitely trying to sell you a relic that looks suspiciously like a chicken bone. There is no such thing as a peaceful morning commute in Constantinople. If you leave your home and reach your destination without being cursed, sold something questionable, or nearly run over by a man in a toga on a donkey, it's considered a triumph. The street is a game board of cobblestones, mystery fluids, and other people's poor choices. You step out into a flood of humanity. Artisans hauling tools, bakers rushing bread carts that smell like heaven and burn like hell if they catch you in the ankle. Senators in silk robes glide by, pretending not to hear the fishmonger screaming about discounted eels. And you, armed with nothing but your elbows and a look of "I'm already late," wade into the madness. The roads are clogged with everything that can walk, roll, or honk. Ox carts groan under the weight of amphorae filled with wine, oil, or lies, sometimes all 3. Donkeys bray in protest as their owners hurl insults and olive pits at passing bureaucrats. Children dart between legs with the precision of trained thieves. And somewhere a blind bard is narrating the entire scene like it's a gladiator match. Your sandals slap against wet stone. You're not sure what it's wet with, and you've learned not to ask. The gutters overflow with runoff from bathhouses, spilled wine, and the eternal mystery liquid known only as city juice. You sidestep a pile of what may have once been cabbage, narrowly avoid a pigeon dive-bombing your head, and find yourself face to face with a man selling relics. "Blessed toe bone of Saint Euphemia," he shouts, holding up something distressingly knobby. "Cures headaches, heartbreak, and taxes." You decline. He offers you a smaller bone, perfect for travel. You flee. The street narrows as you approach the forum. Columns loom on either side, majestic in a we haven't dusted since Justinian sort of way. At the center, speakers shout from platforms, some political, some religious, all sweaty. You recognize one of them as the man who once tried to exorcise your cousin's cabbage cart. It did not work. As you push past a group arguing about whether icons have eyes in heaven, you feel something tug at your belt. You spin around, too late. Your pouch is lighter. The child thief is already gone, swallowed by a bakery line. You sigh, adjust your tunic, and make peace with eating lentils for dinner again. Traffic worsens near the Mise, the grand central street of the empire. Chariots barrel through like they're auditioning for a Colosseum comeback. The drivers shout warnings that are less helpful than aggressive. "Move or be history" seems to be the morning motto. You leap out of the way just as 2 horses pass by in a blur of foam and poorly contained rage. You duck into a side alley for relief, and instantly regret it. The alley is quiet, yes, but only because it's filled with cats and the smell of regret. A cat stares at you as if it knows your secrets. Another one hisses at your sandals. You nod politely and reverse out. You finally emerge near your workplace, whether that's a stall in the market, a seat at a scribe's desk, or a place in the line of beggars outside the palace. You're sweaty, mildly bruised, and definitely cursed, but you made it. You survived Constantinople's morning commute, a feat on par with surviving war, plague, or dinner with your in-laws. As you catch your breath, a familiar sound returns. The goat. It's followed you. It's stolen someone's tunic. It bleats in triumph. You sigh. Another morning. Another miracle. Work is mandatory. Enthusiasm optional. You could be a baker, a scribbler, a tax collector's assistant, or, if you're unlucky, employed by the bureaucracy, your main skill. Surviving meetings about meetings. In Constantinople, having a job isn't just expected. It's necessary for staying fed, clothed, and somewhat relevant in a city where ambition, gossip, and mildly treasonous sermons are all forms of currency. The problem isn't getting work. The problem is surviving it with your dignity and limbs mostly intact. Let's start with the most respectable low-paying job, baker. If you bake bread, congratulations. You wake up before the sun, inhale more flour than air, and spend half your day sweating over an open fire, shaping dough that will either feed the masses or trigger a philosophical debate about crust density. If your bread collapses, you will be blamed personally. If it's too hard, someone will weaponize it. And if you sell out early, expect a line of angry monks asking if divine patience comes with a receipt. Then there are the scribes. You sit at a desk in a poorly lit room copying things. Not exciting things, no scandalous letters or secret maps, mostly tax documents, prayer books, and the same imperial decree 700 times with different dates. Your handwriting must be perfect. Your ink never spilled, and your posture so rigid that your spine begins whispering legal threats. You don't get breaks. You get contemplative pauses, during which you contemplate if this is really better than manual labor. The tax collector's assistant enjoys a unique blend of paperwork and public loathing. Your job is to help calculate how much people owe, nod sympathetically as they beg, and occasionally dodge flying produce. You become fluent in excuses. Goats that went missing, floods that conveniently destroyed scrolls, cousins who definitely sent payment via pigeon, you're paid in coin, stress, and the lingering suspicion that someday someone will punch you in the theology. Merchants live a different life entirely. If you sell cloth, pottery, or pickled anything, your world is noise and haggling. Every transaction is a performance. A buyer offers 1 coin, you ask for 10, and the dance begins. Somewhere in the middle, you land on a price that leaves both parties suspicious. You develop a merchant face, polite, alert, and deeply untrusting. Theft is common, arguments are louder than festivals. And someone's always selling a genuine Roman helmet that looks suspiciously like a soup bowl with feathers. Then there are jobs you don't choose, like becoming a eunuch in service to the imperial court. It sounds glamorous until you realize it involves endless ceremonies, impossible standards, and exactly 0 chance of romantic scandal. Eunuchs are everywhere. Palace messengers, chamberlains, spiritual advisors, and unfortunately for them, professional scapegoats. Drop a tray, blame the eunuch. Bad harvest, eunuch again. Emperor's weird dream? Obviously, the eunuch's fault. If you're educated, you might land a job teaching, but this means herding children with more energy than sense and trying to get them to recite Homer without lighting their wax tablets on fire. You recite poetry while praying that one of them doesn't ask a theological question that starts a 3-week parental feud. Manual laborers? Brutal work, but honest. You haul bricks, dig ditches, or repair aqueducts with tools older than your grandmother. Your hands are calloused, your back screams nightly, but at least no one asks you to attend a board meeting about parchment margins. Your co-workers are mostly strong, tired, and only mildly superstitious. You bond over shared wounds and the knowledge that no one's ever going to tax you for your opinion. And then there are the jobs you invent. People who train cats to fetch coins. Guys who charge admission to watch cursed pottery. Women who interpret dreams in exchange for dried figs and passive-aggressive poems. If there's a niche, someone's exploiting it. Half the economy runs on loopholes, charisma, and sheer audacity. At the end of the day, you return home covered in sweat, soot, or ink. Your body aches, your pouch is light, but you've earned your bread. You've survived another shift in the empire of endless jobs. Now, time to rest until someone wakes you up asking if you've heard about the new imperial tax on sandals. Markets in Constantinople are a riot of sound and colour. Want some figs? Prepare to barter with a grandmother who negotiates like a Visigoth at a clearance sale. Hope you enjoy the smell of pickled fish in the morning. Ah, the street market, a glorious battlefield where dignity is lost, olives are thrown, and you learn that haggling is both an art and a minor contact sport. You wake up thinking you might just pick up a few vegetables. You return 3 hours later with a cracked amphora, 2 gossip stories, and a strong suspicion that you've been tricked into purchasing haunted lentils. The market isn't a single place, it's an experience. A sprawling, chaotic, noisy tapestry stretching through the alleys, open squares, and literal intersections of your daily life. It opens at dawn, whether you're ready or not. Merchants set up their carts with the subtlety of a military invasion. Wooden stands groan under the weight of goods. Herbs, dates, fabric, live chickens, and things in jars that probably shouldn't be in jars. The smells are unforgettable. Freshly baked bread battles roasted chestnuts for dominance, while dried fish makes a surprise ambush on your nostrils. A butcher is offering cuts of meat so fresh they argued with him, while a cheese seller insists that mold is part of the flavor profile. The aroma of garlic competes with perfume strong enough to stun a mule. You feel equal parts hungry and violated. Vendors shout their wares with theatrical flair, often improvising lyrics that rhyme fish with forgiveness. One man swears his figs are so sweet they could end a feud. Another claims his onions were blessed by a passing monk and now repel both demons and in-laws. You're not convinced, but it's a compelling pitch. Every transaction is a negotiation. Prices are fluid, logic is optional, and success is measured not in coin but in smugness. You ask how much for the pomegranates. The vendor says 8 coins. You laugh. He laughs. Someone behind you coughs in dramatic disbelief. You offer 3. He acts as though you've insulted his ancestors. After an impassioned debate involving weather, imperial politics, and the quality of your sandals, you settle on 5. You feel victorious. He smiles like he's sold you fermented pebbles. The crowd is thick and interactive. Children dart between legs like pickpocketing shadows. Chickens squawk in baskets that look dangerously escapable. Someone's goat has chewed through a corner of the cabbage stall and is now making direct eye contact with you, daring you to stop it. You do not. Over by the spice merchants, things get serious. Dried saffron, imported cinnamon, and mysterious powders wrapped in cloth squares are handled like treasure. Prices are whispered. Deals are made with complex nods. And if you sneeze near the pepper stand, you'll be offered both a sample and a sharp warning about the perils of reckless inhalation. Textile vendors display bolts of cloth with flair, snapping the fabric dramatically in the wind. One insists this particular linen was woven by a woman who dreamt of St. Helena. You nod appreciatively while checking the thread count and wondering if the stain is wine or prophecy. A silk trader in the corner sells fabric so fine it disappears in the sunlight, and so expensive your coin pouch spontaneously clenches in fear. Fake relics abound. There's a man with a table full of bone fragments, every one of them allegedly from a saint. Saint Philip's knuckle, Saint Euphemia's elbow, Saint someone's entirely unidentifiable shoulder shard. They all come with certificates written in enthusiastic but suspicious Greek. For 5 extra coins, he'll throw in a miracle. Markets are also where news travels. Someone swears the emperor sneezed twice during morning prayers, clearly a sign of plague or divine disapproval. Another vendor mutters about icon smashers in the provinces. You smile politely, buy a bag of plums, and immediately drop 3, because your pouch is made of hope and holes. By the time you head home, your arms are full, your ears are ringing, and your dignity is slightly bruised. But your pantry is stocked. Your sandals somehow survived, and you've haggled well enough to earn a wink from the bread seller. In Constantinople, that counts as a raise. You've never seen this much paperwork in your life, and you're starting to suspect it's sentient. Every permit requires another signature, 3 bribes, and a stamp from a guy named Nicetas, who hasn't been sober since 997. Ah, yes. The Byzantine bureaucracy, so complex, so sprawling, so profoundly committed to making you suffer, that modern red tape looks like a lemonade stand. Want to build a fence? You'll need permission from the city clerk, a tax assessor, a priest, and the man who lives under the stairs and knows a guy. Need a replacement roof tile? That's Form 48F. And if you filled out 48E instead, congratulations, you've now been flagged for possible heresy. Your journey begins with a queue, not a neat, single-file line, but a chaotic mass of elbows, shouting, and passive-aggressive sighing. You stand in what you hope is the right corridor of the Office of Public Affairs, waiting to submit a request to the sub-prefectural permit liaison's deputy clerk. You're holding a stack of scrolls so thick you're developing early-stage scoliosis. And every time you shift your weight, 3 wax seals fall off and roll away like bureaucratic marbles. The clerk's desk is a battlefield of ink, crumbs, and paperwork. Behind it sits Nicetas, a man whose blood type is wine and whose beard contains a suspicious number of breadcrumbs. He squints at your documents like they've personally insulted his grandmother. He nods once, grunts twice, and then proceeds to stamp exactly none of them. Missing signature from the overseer of weights and roofs, he says, pointing vaguely in the direction of 3 other buildings and a pigeon coop. You try to explain that this request has nothing to do with weights or roofs, but Nicetas has already turned to the next victim, who appears to be applying for a license to keep bees inside a library. Undeterred, you march across the forum, your sandals slapping angrily against the cobblestones. You find the Office of Weights and Roofs tucked between a bathhouse and a bakery, as if it's hiding from its own employees. Inside, there's one man at a desk surrounded by measuring tools, cracked tiles, and what might be a dead plant, or a very relaxed fern. He tells you you're in the wrong place, but signs your form anyway for good luck. Back you go. On your return to Nicetas, you're intercepted by a tax official demanding clarification about your property lines, specifically whether your house technically overlaps with the neighbor's chicken shed. You say no. He says yes. A map is produced. It's upside down and drawn by a child. You settle the matter by agreeing to host his cousin's wedding next spring. Finally, Nicetas gives you a proper stamp. You'd celebrate if your legs weren't asleep and your soul permanently bruised. Now, just one more thing. Delivery of the document to the Ministry of Civil Affairs, located, of course, on the opposite end of the city, up a hill, past 3 aggressive nuns and a man selling unofficial maps of official offices. At the ministry, another queue. This one includes a man with a goat, a merchant claiming his warehouse was cursed, and a woman shouting about the injustice of olive taxation. A functionary named Theodora, who speaks entirely in sighs, takes your scroll, peers at it, and informs you it's missing the mark of the regional ink examiner. You laugh, not because it's funny, but because the only other option is spontaneous combustion. This is life in the Byzantine bureaucracy, a maze of departments with overlapping jurisdictions, contradictory laws, and employees who make things up as they go. Every process spawns 5 more. Every answer breeds a new form. There are rumors of a man who entered the Office of Maritime Licensing in 1003 and is still waiting to be seen. And yet, somehow, it functions. Just barely. You leave the office exhausted, slightly paper-cut, and filled with admiration for anyone who survives this on a daily basis. You've earned nothing except a stamp, a story, and perhaps a small ulcer. And honestly, that stamp is a miracle. Religion saturates every aspect of daily life. Morning prayers are followed by afternoon processions, all under the watchful eyes of saints painted on every available surface. And if you forget a ritual, good luck. Your neighbor will remind you, loudly, at 2 a.m. In Constantinople, religion isn't just a belief system, it's the Wi-Fi, electricity, and neighborhood watch all rolled into one. It connects everyone, powers everything, and occasionally drops out when the incense gets too thick. Faith is not a private matter. It's public, performative, and subject to intense peer review by women named Helena, with unforgiving eyebrows. You start your day not with a stretch or a cup of coffee, but with a hasty sign of the cross in 3 directions while muttering a prayer that's been passed down for 5 generations and probably mistranslated by year 2. Forgetting it isn't an option. Last time you skipped, your baker burned your bread, your sandals broke, and you stubbed your toe so hard it might have achieved sainthood. Your home, like every other home, is decorated with icons. They're everywhere, on the walls, above the door, near the bed, even one carved onto your wooden spoon. Some are simple paintings of saints. Others are more elaborate, with gold leaf and those overly intense saint eyes that seem to follow you whenever you eat something slightly sinful, like meat on a Wednesday. Going outside means passing by a shrine or two, each with flickering candles, wilted flowers, and one guy who's been kneeling there so long he might legally count as furniture. Churches dominate every neighborhood, and there's a good chance one is being built, renovated, or argued about at this very moment. Most are named after saints, a few after relics, and at least one after an incident involving a holy goose and a wayward emperor. Services happen constantly. Morning prayers, vespers, liturgies, feast days, fast days, half-feast days, and Saint Someone's Toe was discovered commemorations. You don't always know why you're standing in a smoky room chanting in Greek with 200 others, but you do it because it would be rude not to. And also, Helena is watching. The air inside the churches is 90% incense and 10% muffled coughing. The priests wear robes that shimmer like fish scales and speak in tones that vibrate through your sternum. Everything echoes, including your stomach when you skip breakfast because of fasting. You bow, cross yourself, kneel, stand, kneel again, and try not to pass out from the candle smoke. This is cardio now. And let's talk about fasting. The calendar is packed with fast days. Lent? That's the warm-up. There are fasts for saints, for holy days, for Wednesdays, Fridays, and reasons lost to time. Meat is out. Dairy is suspicious. Olive oil is only okay if you whisper an apology to Saint Basil. By week 2, You've learned 12 different ways to cook lentils and discovered a deep, complicated hatred for chickpeas. Then come the processions, spontaneous rivers of holiness that flood the streets with chanting, banners, relics, and the occasional donkey draped in velvet. You'll be on your way to the market when suddenly you're swept up in a crowd following a shard of the true cross, a bishop holding a jawbone, and 5 small children inexplicably playing flutes. These can last for hours. Participation is not optional. Superstition is the unofficial sibling of WWW, organized religion. Everyone carries amulets. Some are shaped like crosses. Others are bundles of herbs tied with string and faith. You've met at least 3 people who claim to have seen St. George on a rooftop, and one woman who swears the Virgin Mary cured her goat's limp. You believe them, if only because it's easier than arguing. Theology, of course, is a full-contact sport. Disagreeing with someone's view on the dual nature of Christ can escalate into a citywide debate, a riot, or a polite invitation to exile. Everyone has opinions, and they're all loudly wrong according to everyone else. If you're smart, you nod, agree vaguely, and change the subject to bread. By nightfall, you light your candle, murmur your prayers, and try not to think about the time you accidentally ate cheese on a fast day in front of a monk. You're still not sure if that's why your roof leaks. Faith is constant. Ritual is everywhere. And survival. That depends on how well you remember your saints, your fasts, and how to pretend you didn't just yawn during the bishop's 40-minute homily. Lunch is a humble affair. There's soup that's mostly broth, bread that's mostly stale, and a condiment called garum that's older than your building. Sometimes, a nice merchant will toss you a date if you survive his sales pitch. As the sun climbs higher over Constantinople, you realize it's time for the midday meal. Hunger gnaws at your stomach, and your body demands sustenance, even if what's available isn't exactly culinary delight. Soup is a staple. It's mostly water, occasionally flecked with herbs or lentils, and occasionally suspicious bits of something that might once have been fish. You stir it carefully, hoping the flavor isn't as aggressive as the smell. It usually is. Bread accompanies the soup, dense and stale, serving less as food and more as a reminder that the city doesn't cater to modern palates. You bite carefully, aware that a sudden crumb break could puncture the roof of your mouth. Chewing slowly, you marvel at the resilience required to make bread last longer than a day, and consider the distant miller who ground this particular batch. You hope he is proud. Then there's garum, the ubiquitous fish sauce. It's pungent, briny, and surprisingly versatile, applied liberally to everything from bread to soup. You dip a piece of bread cautiously, trying not to inhale too deeply, because one whiff is enough to clear a room. It's a staple for those who can tolerate it, a trial for newcomers, and an ongoing culinary gamble. Somehow, the empire survives, despite everyone's mixed feelings about fermented fish. Lunch is not merely about sustenance, it's also a social affair. Neighbors gather, merchants shout, and the occasional philosopher wanders by, offering opinions on proper soup temperature or the ethical treatment of olives. You nod politely, sip the broth, and pray that your manners suffice. Constantinople is a city where even lunchtime has consequences if you offend the wrong person with a distracted glance or an unappreciated compliment. Street vendors frequently interrupt your meal with colorful sales pitches. A merchant carrying dates, figs, or dried fish will leap into view, gesturing wildly, insisting that his goods are the best you will ever encounter. You nod, consider politely declining, and then discover the merchant is suddenly beside you, tossing a date with the accuracy of a seasoned juggler. Catching it is optional. Survival is mandatory. You manage it, chewing carefully while avoiding eye contact that might be interpreted as arrogance. Conversation during lunch ranges from the mundane to the absurd. Discussions about the emperor's sneeze, the latest council meeting, or the theological significance of a particularly pious goat are common. You contribute minimally, nodding and occasionally gesturing, careful not to escalate a debate into a 3-hour argument over olive distribution or the relative merits of lentils versus beans. Diplomacy is as essential as nutrition. By the time you finish, you are nourished, just enough, and mentally prepared for the afternoon. The soup, bread, and garum have done their work, sustaining body and spirit, while the social rituals reinforce your place in the intricate web of the city. You wipe your hands on your tunic, glance at the bustling streets, and prepare for the next round of responsibilities, knowing that the simple act of eating lunch in Constantinople is a small triumph in a city of complexity, chaos, and unexpected generosity. Lunch in Constantinople is never luxurious, always necessary, and occasionally a performance. You've survived the broth, the bread, the garum, and the merchant's theatrical sales pitch. That counts as a minor victory in the empire's endless day. Bathing is communal, noisy, and more political than you'd think. Everyone's naked, everyone's gossiping, and the water is only slightly cleaner than the street outside. On the plus side, you leave smelling like rosemary and regret. You approach the bathhouse cautiously, aware that this is more than a place to wash. It's a theatre, a council, and a gossip hub rolled into one. The air is heavy with steam, soap, or what passes for it, and the faint tang of humanity in close quarters. Inside, marble floors glisten under dripping water and oil, and the constant murmur of conversation creates a dense soundtrack of whispers, laughter, and the occasional scandalous shout. The apoditerium, or changing room, is your first challenge. Wooden benches line the walls, each occupied by people who seem completely indifferent to your existence, yet acutely aware of every inch of your exposed self. You set down your belongings, aware that theft, judgment, or unsolicited advice could occur at any moment. Other bathers nod politely, or perhaps critically. You aren't sure. Everything is scrutinized here. Your tunic, your hair, your posture, even the way you hold your towel. Once undressed, you proceed to the tepidarium, the warm room. This is the introduction, the slow immersion into communal bathing. You sit, let the heat wrap around you, and observe. Conversation ranges from household disputes to empire-wide scandals, often blending into a single, indecipherable chatter. Gossip is currency. Hearing it is education. You learn who argued with the fishmonger, which noble insulted their cousin, and which goat allegedly betrayed its master again. You nod silently, absorbing information you might or might not need later. The strigil is next. You slather yourself in olive oil, a necessity for both hygiene and skin preservation, and brace for the scrapers. An attendant or friend runs the curved metal tool along your body, scraping off oil, sweat, and a surprising layer of accumulated regret. It's uncomfortable, invigorating, and deeply cleansing all at once. You marvel at the strange satisfaction of watching yesterday's grime slide into the marble drain, thinking perhaps you've conquered something small but significant. Then comes the coldarium, the hot bath. Steam rises in thick, fragrant clouds, scented with herbs and incense. You step into the pool, muscles relaxing in the near-boiling water. Around you, people float, lounge, and gossip. Someone recounts a theological dispute from the morning. Someone else critiques the emperor's latest decree. You nod, understanding nothing, but appreciating the performance. The heat is intense enough to make you question every life choice that led you here, but refreshing enough to encourage a vague sense of renewal. The frigidarium, the cold bath, concludes the ritual. The plunge is shocking, a reminder that endurance is part of cleanliness. You gasp, flinch, and emerge invigorated. Your skin tingles, your blood flows, and your mind briefly forgets the market, taxes, and street chaos. For a moment, you are simply human. Once dressed, you step back into the world, smelling faintly of rosemary, soap, and a lingering trace of human ambition. The bathhouse has served its purpose, cleaning the body, entertaining the senses, and connecting you with the social and political heartbeat of the city. You leave with a sense of accomplishment, minor soreness, and a subtle understanding that in Constantinople, even bathing is an elaborate performance. Bathing is more than hygiene. It is social, political, and occasionally perilous. You are cleaner, wiser, and slightly humbler. And yes, still a little sticky. You catch a cough, and suddenly Aunt Helena is rubbing onion juice on your feet. Doctors recommend prayer, leeches, or both. Half the population swears by saints' bones. The other half just swears. Disease in Constantinople is not subtle. A sniffle, a cough, or a sudden chill is enough to spark panic, gossip, and a minor household crisis. Your body reacts first, your neighbors react second, and by the time you realize you might just have a mild cold, the city treats you as though you've contracted something that could level walls and topple emperors. Survival requires caution, ingenuity, and an exceptionally high tolerance for strange remedies. You begin at home, naturally. Aunt Helena, or an equally devoted relative, applies her own concoctions. Onion juice rubbed into your feet is standard. Perhaps garlic, mustard, or mashed herbs are added for good measure. The rationale is both symbolic and practical. The stronger the smell, the more effective the cure. And if nothing else, anyone approaching you will stay far away. You lie still, wincing slightly, and consider that your ancestors may have survived diseases partly through luck and partly through olfactory warfare. Doctors, when consulted, are a blend of science, superstition, and confidence bordering on arrogance. They examine your pulse, your tongue, and your eyebrows. They nod, frown, and announce that you are out of balance. Their solutions are varied. Leeches are popular. They attach themselves to the skin, suck blood, and are believed to remove excess humors. You lie still, marveling at the tiny vampire's dedication, and hope that this strange therapy doesn't introduce more problems than it solves. Prayer is mandatory. Saints' bones, relics, and icons are displayed with precision. You hold a small talisman, light a candle, or mutter a whispered devotion while hoping divine intervention works faster than the onion juice. Saints' bones are often credited with miraculous cures, though occasionally they seem to have limited efficacy. Or at least, that's what the anecdotes suggest. Your neighbor swears that Saint Euphemia cured her headache, but she also swears she saw a cat recite scripture last Tuesday. Evidence is optional in Constantinople. The city itself becomes a participant in your illness. Public bathhouses are avoided lest you encounter additional contagions. Markets are navigated cautiously, dodging coughing strangers and overzealous merchants. Even a stroll along the forum becomes a calculated risk. Exposure to fresh air versus exposure to new maladies is a dilemma that requires careful judgment and occasionally a dramatic sniffle to appear healthy enough to pass scrutiny. Medications are primitive, herbal, and occasionally terrifying. A poultice of crushed roots, a cup of bitter tea, or the application of honey to a wound may be prescribed. You follow instructions precisely, aware that the efficacy is uncertain, and that failure might provoke commentary from anyone within earshot. The combination of superstition, folk remedies, and urban rumor makes every treatment an adventure and sometimes a gamble. Neighbors contribute unsolicited advice, One claims that stepping on a church mosaic cures fevers. Another insists that sleeping with a pigeon on your chest strengthens your lungs. You nod politely, mentally cataloguing the remedies for potential future use or avoidance. The communal nature of advice ensures that no illness is ever truly private. Everyone has an opinion, and half the population has a cure, real or imagined. By the end of the day, whether cured or not, you've survived exposure to leeches, questionable herbal concoctions, aggressive family care, and citywide gossip. Disease is a reminder of human vulnerability, ingenuity, and stubbornness. In Constantinople, surviving an illness is as much about social navigation as about bodily recovery. By noon, everyone's tired, grumpy, and considering a nap. Of course, the boss strolls by right as you drift off, so you master the ancient art of sleeping with your eyes open. The midday slump in Constantinople is both predictable and merciless. Hours of navigating crowded streets, dodging carts, balancing market goods, or simply surviving the morning's minor crises leave even the most enthusiastic citizen ready to collapse into an unceremonious nap. Hunger, heat, and human endurance all conspire to make your eyelids heavy, your thoughts foggy, and your ambition wobbly. At work, the environment does little to help. Clerks, scribes, and artisans operate under fluorescent, oil lamp light, which seems dim enough to encourage drowsiness. The hum of the city drifts in, the clatter of carts on cobblestones, merchants shouting at pigeons, street children squealing in joyful chaos. Even the occasional goat contributes its own brand of distraction. All of this serves as a lullaby for anyone struggling to stay upright. You shift in your seat, trying to keep alert. Pens or styluses lie in wait. Scrolls and tablets demand attention. And the boss, or someone who functions equivalently, paces near enough to remind you that conscious participation is expected. You inhale, exhale, and attempt to focus on the work at hand, while your brain drifts into gentle, tempting daydreams. A nap in a field of olives, a loaf of fresh bread, or the miraculous disappearance of all paperwork. Mastering the art of sleeping with your eyes open is a subtle skill. Tilt your head just slightly, let your eyelids flutter in a convincing rhythm, and occasionally scribble a note that looks impressive from afar. Nod at the boss, if approached. Smile faintly. If anyone asks a question, respond vaguely but enthusiastically. The goal is to maintain the illusion of diligence while allowing your body the brief rest it desperately craves. Noise management becomes an involuntary skill. You learn to filter out the background chaos. The loud argument about taxes in the next cubicle, the clanging of pans in the communal kitchen, and the distant wail of a merchant's goat trapped in the alley. All of it becomes ambient noise, a soundtrack to your covert dozing. Your body relaxes while your mind performs careful calculations on what you'll accomplish after the slump passes, after your nap, after the bread break, after you survive the next inspection. Food is essential. A small snack, stale bread, a bit of cheese, or a fig tossed your way by a generous vendor offers a temporary boost. You chew slowly, savoring the moment, appreciating the pause, knowing that energy restored here is worth its weight in surviving the afternoon. The boss may glance in your direction, but strategic eating and casual eye contact convey productivity. By the end of this ritual, you've maintained appearances, gathered a little strength, and survived the early afternoon without major incidents. Colleagues may still yawn, grumble, or peek at each other suspiciously, but you've achieved a quiet victory. You are alert enough to respond when required, rested enough to survive the heat, and mentally prepared for whatever comes next. The midday slump is universal. It's a test of patience, cunning, and minor theatrics. In Constantinople, mastering it while avoiding detection maintaining reputation, and preventing paperwork disasters is as vital as any skill taught in the schools, markets, or bathhouses. You emerge stronger, slightly sleepier, and ready to continue navigating the city's relentless rhythms. Your family is big, loud, and opinionated. In-laws come and go, but the gossip lasts forever. Someone's always planning a wedding, a funeral, or a surprise intervention about your career choices. Family life in Constantinople is simultaneously a source of comfort, chaos, and mild terror. Households are crowded, bustling affairs where multiple generations coexist under one roof or within shouting distance. Children run through narrow corridors, elders lecture with passion bordering on theatrical, and neighbors occasionally peek in to witness the drama firsthand. Privacy is minimal, patience is tested, and personal space is more theoretical than real. Every interaction with relatives carries potential consequences. Breakfast can include critiques of your posture, your choice of bread, or whether you have washed your tunic sufficiently in the last week. Conversations flow seamlessly between gossip, advice, and veiled insults, all punctuated by a chorus of agreement, dissent, or laughter. You learn early to nod politely, smile when required, and memorize which topics trigger arguments best reserved for the outdoor forums. In-laws are a particular subset of social hazard. They arrive unannounced with opinions, expectations, and minor food offerings that double as subtle tests of loyalty. They observe your home, your table manners, and your relationship with local tradespeople. One misplaced word can become a family legend, recounted at weddings, baptisms, or funerals for decades to come. You develop techniques for handling them: polite agreement, strategic silence, and, when necessary, a carefully timed cup of wine. Weddings, funerals, and unexpected family interventions punctuate life like clockwork. Every event involves preparation, discussion, and a level of drama that could rival a theatrical performance. During weddings, you must navigate seating arrangements, dowry disputes, and the occasional over-eager goat wandering through the courtyard. Funerals require both solemnity and negotiation over who speaks first, who wears which colors, and whether the deceased's favorite foods are represented in the offerings. And surprise interventions, usually regarding career choices, marriage prospects, or questionable culinary habits, arrive with intensity, making you wonder whether family meetings are a civic duty, an endurance trial, or both. Inheritance is another layer of complexity. Properties, money, and heirlooms are discussed, disputed, and sometimes quietly redistributed. The process is formalized in documents, debated over meals, and gossiped about endlessly. You observe quietly, offering input only when it might save you from future entanglement, and accept that your opinions will eventually be catalogued and recalled at the worst possible moment. Despite the chaos, family life is a source of resilience. Shared meals, joint celebrations, and collective problem-solving create bonds that withstand gossip, disagreements, and occasional minor calamities. You learn the subtle art of compromise, giving in on minor points to preserve peace, asserting yourself on important issues, and developing a keen sense of when to remain silent. These skills extend beyond the household, helping you navigate the market, the street, and even the city's labyrinthine bureaucracy. Evening brings relative calm. Children are settled, elders are engaged in storytelling or prayers, and you can finally reflect on the day. Laughter and minor bickering fade into background noise as you appreciate the unspoken support, the shared history, and the resilience cultivated through decades of familial chaos. In Constantinople, family life is unavoidable, overwhelming, and oddly nurturing. It teaches patience, endurance, diplomacy, and the remarkable ability to survive chaos while remaining mostly sane. And though the gossip, debates, and interventions may never truly end, they are also proof that family, however loud, opinionated, and unpredictable, is a source of enduring connection. You take a stroll by the famous Theodosian walls, marveling at their size, and the number of bored soldiers leaning on them. Someone's carved Justinian was here into the stone. A goat eats your lunch. The city walls of Constantinople are impressive, daunting, and occasionally inconvenient. Stretching for miles, they were built to protect the empire from invaders, insulate citizens from chaos, and provide ample opportunities for goats to wreak havoc. As you walk along the base, you can't help but marvel at their sheer scale: thick stone, massive towers, and narrow gates designed for both defense and intimidation. Soldiers patrol the ramparts with casual alertness. Many lean on battlements, arms crossed, occasionally swatting flies or scolding pigeons. They look formidable, but the occasional yawn or doodle in the dust reminds you that boredom is a powerful adversary, even for the guardians of the empire. One soldier waves lazily, perhaps in greeting or perhaps to assert dominance over a goat wandering too close to the walls. You nod in return, hoping your gesture is interpreted as respectful rather than foolish. As you walk, you notice carvings etched into the stones. Justinian was here is prominent, along with faint, older inscriptions whose meaning is lost to time. These markings are a mix of vanity, humor, and historical record, a reminder that even the most formidable fortifications are not immune to human whimsy. You lean closer to inspect a peculiar symbol and realize a child, or perhaps a bored soldier, has etched a goat in mid-leap. You smile. Goats, it seems, are as timeless as empires. Speaking of goats, one immediately claims your lunch. A loaf of bread you were saving for later is suddenly in the mouth of an opportunistic local goat. Chewed with remarkable efficiency, you chase it briefly, waving your hands and muttering threats in a plain language you hope it understands. The goat bleats triumphantly, drops a piece of bread near a wall, and disappears into the alley, leaving you hungry, amused, and slightly embarrassed. This is life in Constantinople. Heroic walls, vigilant soldiers, and unpredictable livestock. The ramparts themselves are both a strategic marvel and a social stage. Guards practice formations, inspect towers, and occasionally indulge in storytelling. They discuss recent sieges, distant battles, and rumors of invading forces with the sort of calm urgency that only centuries of preparation can produce. You eavesdrop carefully, learning more about imperial strategy than you ever wanted to, all while avoiding stepping on a discarded spear or a cowpat left by an unobservant herder. The city's defensive architecture also doubles as a path for leisure. Citizens stroll along sections of the walls when permitted, enjoying the panoramic view of Constantinople, the harbour, markets, churches, and distant hills. The walls serve as both shield and observation point, a place where the scale of the city, the empire, and human ingenuity becomes tangible. You feel dwarfed, awed, and slightly foolish carrying a half-eaten lunch. Minor hazards abound. Uneven stones, loose mortar, and the ever-present goats demand attention. You navigate carefully, noting that the city's designers were focused on defense, not pedestrian comfort. Nevertheless, the experience is exhilarating. You glimpse history carved into stone, observe soldiers maintaining vigilance, and witness the interactions of citizens with a living, breathing fortification. By the time you leave, your stomach is empty, your feet are tired, and your mind is filled with admiration for the combination of military genius, human creativity, and accidental goat chaos. The Theodosian walls are not just fortifications. They are a symbol of resilience, community, and the unpredictable hilarity of life in Constantinople. Entertainment is rowdy, raucous, and probably illegal. Chariot races are the big draw, but so are slapstick comedies, puppet shows, and heated debates about the nature of Christ that end with someone throwing cheese. In Constantinople, entertainment is a full-contact sport, a performance, and occasionally a minor legal risk. The hippodrome dominates the scene, a massive arena pulsing with energy, noise, and the occasional flying object. Chariot races are the highlight, drawing crowds of citizens who scream, cheer, and throw coins with reckless enthusiasm. 4 teams, reds, blues, greens, and whites, compete with unrelenting speed and barely contained fury. You pick a team, usually the blues because tradition dictates it, and join the chaos, dodging stray coins, yelling children, and the occasional overly ambitious spectator. The charioteers themselves are a sight to behold. They lean low over their chariots, urging their horses to near impossible speeds, whips cracking in sync with the pounding hooves. Every lap brings the potential for glory or a spectacular crash. The crowd erupts with each near miss, a combination of awe, fear, and the thrill of almost witnessing tragedy. Betting is rampant. Opinions fly faster than chariots. By the end of the day, you are exhausted, exhilarated, and convinced that your lungs deserve a medal for surviving the continuous yelling. Theatre is equally chaotic but in a different way. Slapstick comedies dominate, with exaggerated gestures, improbable scenarios, and actors who are not afraid to throw props, sometimes at the audience. Puppetry, meanwhile, is a blend of satire and social commentary. Wooden goats accuse senators of treachery. Miniature bishops debate theology with sock puppets, and exaggerated reenactments of past riots keep citizens both entertained and mildly terrified. Watching, you appreciate the ingenuity required to keep an audience engaged, while simultaneously dodging flying tomatoes and moral indignation. Evening entertainment spills into the streets. Philosopher fights, debates about the nature of Christ, the soul, and proper olive oil consumption often escalate to physical comedy. Someone throws cheese, another gestures wildly, and the discussion devolves into laughter, argument, and sometimes minor chaos. Participation is encouraged. Observation is mandatory, and learning the rhythm of escalation and de-escalation is key to survival. You nod sagely, avoiding eye contact with those wielding cheese, and occasionally throw a small, symbolic fig into the fray to demonstrate engagement without inviting injury. Music and acrobatics accompany these spectacles. Drummers, flutists, and lutanists provide a constant soundtrack, sometimes skillful, sometimes experimental. Acrobats leap between carts, balance precariously on barrels, and perform minor miracles with torches. Occasionally someone lands in the crowd, eliciting gasps and applause. Street performers are both entertainers and teachers. Their antics teach timing, courage, and the ability to improvise under stress. Even minor games are part of the entertainment ecosystem. Dice, knucklebones, and rudimentary board games occupy spectators during intermissions. Betting is ubiquitous. Arguments erupt, and minor scuffles are common. Everything in Constantinople's entertainment is interactive, unpredictable, and slightly hazardous. By the end of the day, you leave with ears ringing, stomach sore from laughing or cheering, and a sense of exhilaration that only the city's unique mix of chaos, art, and public spectacle can provide. Whether watching chariots, dodging cheese, or marveling at acrobats, you are reminded that life in Constantinople is a performance, and survival requires wit, agility, and a strong appreciation for absurdity. Entertainment here is immersive, exhausting, and unforgettable, a testament to the city's vitality, resilience, and uniquely rowdy spirit. You've been summoned to the palace, which is both flattering and terrifying. The halls are full of whispers, robes that cost more than your house, and enough gold leaf to make a dentist retire. Just remember, never look the emperor in the eye unless you want a job or an execution. Entering the imperial palace is like stepping into another world. The marble floors gleam under a light that seems too perfect to be real, reflecting the gold leaf that covers doors, columns, and ceilings. Everywhere you look, robes shimmer with silk, embroidery, and sometimes thread that is literally impossibly expensive. You can't help but notice that every footstep echoes, as if the walls themselves are judging your presence, reminding you that this is a place where missteps, literal or figurative, have consequences. The halls are alive with whispers. Courtiers glide past, speaking in hushed tones, eyes flicking in your direction as if assessing your potential threat level. You nod politely, aware that even a casual shrug could be interpreted as disdain, or worse, as a secret plot against the throne. Every gesture is measured, every word carefully chosen. Etiquette is not just a formality here, it is survival. One misstep could earn a glare, a whispered reprimand, or, in extreme cases, a trip to a dark corner with unfortunate consequences. Gold leaf is everywhere. Doors, furniture, and even seemingly mundane objects are gilded, reminding you that wealth and status in the palace are displayed aggressively and without subtlety. Chandeliers glimmer like captured sunlight, and tapestries depict battles, saints, and imperial victories in excruciating detail. You try not to feel overwhelmed by the sensory extravagance, focusing instead on maintaining the appropriate posture, expression, and humility. The emperor's presence dominates everything. He moves with a deliberate grace, aware of how his robes trail behind him, how his every gesture communicates power, and how his gaze rarely, if ever, falls on an ordinary citizen. Looking him directly in the eye is dangerous. You keep your eyes polite but averted, nodding slightly, as if to say, "I am loyal, competent, and harmless." It's a delicate balance, and one miscalculated glance could be fatal, or at least career-ending. Courtiers are an intricate ecosystem. They whisper, plot, and vie for attention with skill and subtlety. Some approach you with advice that may or may not be genuine. Others offer veiled threats disguised as polite conversation. You listen carefully, nodding, smiling, and filing away each statement in your mind for future reference, or as ammunition for navigating subsequent encounters. Every interaction is a lesson in diplomacy, patience, and self-preservation. Rumors swirl incessantly. Someone was seen arguing with a eunuch. A noble's cousin is rumored to have been banished. A diplomat allegedly insulted the emperor's new sandals. Whether true or exaggerated, these stories circulate like wildfire, shaping behavior, alliances, and gossip in the corridors. You overhear a particularly juicy rumor about a hidden chamber under the palace that contains both treasure and a slightly aggressive goat. You mentally note its existence while keeping your expression neutral, pretending to care only about your own assigned duties. Banquets are another challenge entirely. Tables groan under platters of exotic food, wine flows freely, and conversation ranges from polite flattery to subtle accusations. Seating arrangements are strategic and often deadly, figuratively, sometimes literally. You smile, nod, and occasionally toast, aware that even a minor faux pas, spilling wine, mispronouncing a saint's name, or chewing too loudly, could become the subject of whispered scorn for months, or worse, draw the emperor's attention in a negative way. Every interaction, every glance, and every gesture requires vigilance. The palace is a labyrinth of power, performance, and peril. Even as you marvel at the opulence, You are acutely aware that etiquette is not merely social nicety, it is survival, status, and the invisible line between favor and misfortune. By the time you exit, slightly exhausted and slightly awed, you have learned the subtle dance of observation, diplomacy, and restraint. The imperial court is dazzling, terrifying, and instructive. A reminder that in Constantinople, power is displayed lavishly. Rumors carry weight, and surviving etiquette is both an art and a necessity. Dinner brings family, neighbors, and heated arguments about theology. The stew is surprisingly spicy, and the bread is definitely stale. If you're lucky, dessert is something sweet. If not, it's another lecture about iconoclasm. Evening in Constantinople is marked by the ritual of dining, which is as much about sustenance as it is about social navigation and survival. The table is a stage, with each family member, neighbor, and occasionally visiting relative playing a role in the elaborate performance of manners, hierarchy, and culinary critique. You approach it cautiously, aware that every bite, every nod, and every comment is subject to scrutiny. The stew is the centerpiece. It bubbles quietly in a large clay pot, releasing aromas that are both enticing and slightly alarming. You take a careful taste, immediately aware that it is far spicier than anticipated. Spices in Constantinople are luxurious, potent, and occasionally applied with reckless abandon. The heat is intense enough to clear the sinuses, strengthen the spirit, and prompt a minor cough that earns a pointed look from the patriarch. You nod politely, sip some water, and continue, hoping your discomfort does not escalate into visible suffering. Bread accompanies the stew, dense and decidedly stale, yet essential. It serves as both utensil and filler, a carbohydrate buffer against the rich spices, and a subtle test of your jaw strength. You break off small pieces, chewing methodically, aware that every crumb falling on the floor will be noticed and silently judged. There's an art to eating this bread gracefully. Do not crumble excessively, do not gnaw audibly, and absolutely avoid flipping it upside down. Conversations at the table are as critical as the food. Theology dominates. A relative insists that icons are essential to salvation. A neighbor argues that they are heretical distractions. Voices rise, hands gesticulate, and small items, spoons, walnuts, or perhaps a forgotten olive, are occasionally used as physical punctuation. You nod, smile, and interject only when necessary, remembering that neutrality can be both a shield and a subtle statement of wisdom. If dessert appears, it is a brief reprieve. Dates, honeyed pastries, or candied nuts offer sweetness and a reminder of fortune. If absent, prepare yourself for another round of lectures. The proper handling of religious observances, the dangers of culinary excess, or a cautionary tale involving a saint and a goat. These lectures are delivered earnestly, with pauses for nodding, sighing, and the occasional dramatic flourish intended to underscore moral points. Spices, beyond adding flavor, are a social instrument. You notice that the amount of cinnamon, pepper, or saffron applied is a reflection of wealth, status, and taste. Those who use too little appear austere. Those who use too much are considered showy or reckless. You measure your reactions carefully, ensuring that your face communicates appreciation without envy, admiration without challenge, and interest without overcommitment. Neighbors' children add chaos. They dart between chairs, ask questions at inconvenient times, and occasionally knock over cups or plates. You maintain composure, gently redirecting them while inwardly marveling at their energy and resilience. Their antics remind you that life in Constantinople is vibrant, unpredictable, and requires constant vigilance, even during meals. By the end of dinner, you have consumed sustenance endured debates, and participated in the complex dance of social dynamics. Your stomach is full, your patience tested, and your mind enriched with both flavor and insight. You leave the table with the satisfaction of survival, the faint aroma of stew and spices clinging to your tunic, and a subtle sense of accomplishment for having navigated the trials of Byzantine dining. Dinner time in Constantinople is more than food. It is practice in diplomacy, observation, and endurance. Every meal teaches lessons, preserves traditions, and reminds you that even the simplest act of eating is intertwined with community, belief, and the unpredictability of life in the empire. You've lost your purse again. Was it the pickpocket or the pigeon that swooped in out of nowhere? Either way, you're not getting it back. The city has one honest cop and 3,000 liars. Street crime in Constantinople is as ubiquitous as the smell of pickled fish, and just as unavoidable. The moment you step outside, you enter a bustling ecosystem of opportunity, cunning, and chaos. Every alley, plaza, and market stall is a stage for petty theft, deception, and occasionally the occasional moral lesson, though you probably won't recognize it until long after your coins are gone. Pickpockets are everywhere. Small children, agile adults, and occasionally the cunning elderly patrol the streets with an efficiency that borders on art. Their hands move with lightning speed, extracting purses, coins, or stray pieces of bread without disturbing the owner's composure. You feel a tug at your belt, spin around, and, too late, the thief is gone, lost in the crowd, leaving you simultaneously frustrated, impressed, and vaguely grateful for your stubborn footwear. Pigeons, it turns out, are not merely ornamental. They participate actively in urban thievery, swooping down at opportune moments to snatch unattended items. You may swear at the air, clap your hands, or attempt negotiation, but the pigeon is unrepentant, flapping away with a coin or morsel in its beak. These birds are agile, persistent, and terrifyingly committed to their mission, teaching you the importance of vigilance and the unpredictability of the city. Street vendors contribute to the confusion. They shout, gesture wildly, and occasionally bump into passers-by to create distractions. While you recover from a startled leap, a purse vanishes or a sandwich is stolen. The vendors rarely intervene, focusing instead on the next customer, the next sale, or the next performance of exaggerated surprise that draws attention away from the theft. You learn to navigate around stalls carefully, always aware that proximity to commerce is proximity to risk. The city has one honest cop, or at least the legend claims so. This officer patrols the streets with diligence and minimal corruption, offering the occasional reassurance that not all authority figures are self-serving. Unfortunately, this noble figure is vastly outnumbered by 3,000 less trustworthy individuals, including guards willing to accept bribes, bureaucrats who redirect blame, and informants who delight in exaggerating minor infractions. You appreciate the cop's efforts while simultaneously realizing that any expectation of justice is more aspirational than practical. Crime is social. Witnesses, bystanders, and even fellow victims often exaggerate, misremember, or outright fabricate stories to enhance personal reputation. A fellow pedestrian might swear they saw the thief clearly, while in reality they were waving to a friend. Merchants might insist a pigeon stole your bread, while secretly hoping the confusion allows them to sell more goods. Survival depends on reading the subtle cues, assessing risks, and keeping a calm demeanor while your purse disappears into the ether. Evening amplifies risk. Shadows lengthen, streets narrow, and the city's natural chaos intensifies. You duck under a balcony, dodge a cart, and narrowly avoid a scuffle over a mislaid cloak. Pickpockets exploit dim corners, and distracted pedestrians. Pigeons patrol from above, and rumors circulate about phantom thieves who operate only after dusk. Your senses are heightened, your stride cautious, and your patience tested. Despite the constant threat, there is a rhythm. Citizens learn to protect their valuables, pedestrians develop awareness, and the occasional bird of conscience or honest cop provides hope. You survive another day by vigilance, adaptability, and a small measure of luck. Coins lost are mourned, but you take pride in having navigated the urban jungle without major injury or embarrassment. In Constantinople, street crime is more than theft. It is a lesson in strategy, observation, and human and avian behavior. Every alley, every cart, every flapping wing contributes to the education of those who walk the city's cobbled streets, teaching patience, cunning, and the acceptance that some losses are permanent. Night falls, and the city lights up with 1,000 oil lamps and twice as many shadows. You listen to the sounds of distant revelers, arguing merchants, and the steady drip of a leaky roof. Sleep is optional. Nighttime in Constantinople is not quiet. It is a living, breathing organism of flickering lights, clattering carts, and echoes of lives unwilling to pause. Oil lamps glow in windows, along streets, and atop towers, casting halos of warmth that mingle with darkness to create ever-shifting shadows. Every corner hides movement, every alley carries a murmur, and every rooftop hosts a story you can almost hear if you strain your ears. The air is thick with scents, the lingering aroma of dinner stews, roasting chestnuts, damp stone, and a hint of smoke from distant hearths. You breathe deeply, appreciating the city's nocturnal perfume, but also noting the faint undertone of mystery and potential chaos. Night is alive, and it does not care whether you are ready for it or not. Street sounds dominate. Merchants argue over lingering transactions, their voices carrying across the cool air. A vendor insists that his figs are not only fresh, but divinely blessed, while another counters with accusations that rival fruits are cursed. Somewhere in the distance, revelers laugh, shout, and spill wine, punctuating the night with exuberance and occasional insult. The harmony is chaotic, yet it pulses with life. Roofs leak, gutters drip, and the water's patter provides a subtle metronome to the city's symphony. A random cat patrols the alley, yowling as if narrating a tragedy. You consider stepping outside to observe, but decide that the combination of uneven cobblestones, potential pickpockets, and the city's characteristic unpredictability makes staying put the safer and slightly more philosophical option. Lamps illuminate the streets, but only partially. Shadows stretch and twist, making familiar corners feel unfamiliar. You notice them shifting as if animated, forming figures that sometimes resemble neighbors, sometimes animals, and occasionally entirely imaginary creatures. Each shadow is a reminder that the city's night is alive, unpredictable, and mildly theatrical. People move differently after dark. Merchants close stalls reluctantly, carrying wares and complaints alike. Citizens hurry home, balancing lanterns, baskets, and the fragile illusion of safety. A group of children plays tag along the walls, their laughter echoing off stone in ways that make you both nostalgic and slightly nervous. You step carefully, aware that the night holds both charm and hazard. Somewhere, a philosopher debates loudly with a friend, or perhaps an unsuspecting passerby, about the nature of the soul, the virtues of wine, or the proper interpretation of a saint's miracle. The argument escalates, gestures grow exaggerated, and eventually a wheel of cheese becomes a projectile. You observe silently, realizing that this is the city's version of late-night theater, where intellect, performance, and absurdity collide. For those attempting sleep, The city provides both challenge and instruction. You learn to adapt. A drip becomes a lullaby, distant laughter, a rhythm for breathing, and the occasional shriek, a punctuation mark in the ongoing narrative of night. Closing your eyes does not guarantee peace. Only your imagination can convert the noise into a tolerable backdrop. By midnight, Constantinople hums with life. Shadows stretch across walls, and the oil lamps flicker like tiny, attentive guardians. Sleep may come, eventually, but only if you surrender to the city's nocturnal performance. Until then, you are part of the symphony, listening, observing, and surviving the ceaseless rhythm of light, sound, and shadow. Night in Constantinople is alive, demanding, and immersive. Every lamp, every drip, and every stray sound reminds you that the city never truly rests, and neither, in a sense, does its heart. Rumors spread, again, that someone's attacking. Is it the Bulgars? The Arabs? The price of spears goes up. You briefly consider signing up as a mercenary, before remembering you faint at the sight of blood. In Constantinople, the threat of invasion is always on the horizon. Or at least, that's what the gossip insists. Alarms ring, rumors fly, and the city collectively wonders whether the walls will hold, whether the gates are secure, and whether your neighbor's goat is hiding strategic intelligence. Every day is punctuated by a mixture of vigilance, panic, and opportunism. The first signs of alarm are subtle. The distant clang of bells, hurried footsteps echoing off stone streets, and the faint smell of smoke used for signal fires. Merchants abandon stalls with surprising speed, carrying wares and shouting warnings as though the empire's survival depends entirely on their courage. You glance at your own belongings, considering whether to flee, hide, or purchase a spear while ignoring the fact that you cannot in fact wield it effectively. Soldiers on the walls are immediately alert. Helmets glint in the fading light, spears are readied, and watchmen peer over battlements with narrowed eyes. The air is tense with anticipation, whispers of strategy circulating through the ranks. You observe, partly impressed, partly terrified, and partly grateful that you are not responsible for coordinating thousands of armored men at a moment's notice. Rumors spread like wildfire. Someone swears they saw the Bulgars massing across the hills. Another insists the Arabs have deployed a new siege engine capable of flattening a city block in minutes. You nod sagely, secretly hoping both are exaggerations, but preparing mentally for the worst-case scenario. In Constantinople, the line between rumor and reality is thin, slippery, and occasionally lethal. Merchants exploit the panic mercilessly. Spears, shields, and helmets disappear from stalls almost instantly. Prices spike. A basket of dried lentils suddenly costs triple, because you never know when the city might need rations. You consider purchasing protective gear, a helmet, or even hiring a mercenary. But then you remember your fainting problem and the fact that combat usually involves injury, yelling, and occasionally unpleasant smells. You opt to stay put. Neighbors react unpredictably. Some rush to fortify doors, stacking barrels and furniture like modern-day barricades. Others simply scream at passers-by, insisting that every shadow is a scout, every stray goat a spy. Children, sensing excitement, dart through the streets with shrieks of delight, adding chaos to an already tense atmosphere. You watch carefully, trying not to step on anyone or anything, while maintaining the illusion of calm. As alarms continue, you notice the coordination of the city's defenses. Archers line the walls, cavalry prepares behind gates, and scouts move through alleys with speed and purpose. Orders are shouted, horns blown, and occasionally Someone drops a spear while swearing a colorful oath. You admire the organization, even as your pulse races, and you consider hiding behind a particularly large barrel. In the midst of all this, life goes on. Street vendors shout their wares, pigeons flutter nervously above, and cats chase shadows with complete disregard for citywide emergencies. The contrast between the mundane and the potentially catastrophic is striking, reminding you that in Constantinople, chaos is layered, personal, political, and occasionally martial. By the end of the day, the rumors are debunked, the invaders are never quite seen, and the city breathes a collective sigh of relief. Merchants resume selling goods, soldiers lower their spears, and neighbors recount the day's events with varying degrees of exaggeration. You have survived another crisis, imagined or real, without fainting, being trampled, or accidentally joining the army. In Constantinople, the threat of invasion is as constant as the smell of markets, the noise of streets, and the occasional mischievous goat. Survival requires vigilance, quick thinking, and the wisdom to buy a spear without expecting to use it. Today, everyone's fighting about whether Rome or Constantinople is the real Rome. Tensions are high, cheese supplies are low, and someone's probably about to get excommunicated over a pastry recipe. The city feels tense, as though every conversation, gesture, and passing glance could trigger a theological war, or at least a heated discussion over dairy products. Constantinople is alive with chatter, debate, and suspicion, and you quickly realize that even the humblest citizen has a strong opinion on ecclesiastical authority, liturgical correctness, and whether that wedge of cheese is holy enough to survive the evening without triggering moral outrage. Markets are affected first. Cheese vendors shout frantically about dwindling supplies, advertising the last blessed wheel with vigor bordering on panic. You pause, watching as customers argue about the provenance of the dairy. Some swear it was produced under imperial sanction, others insist it came from a monastery blessed by Saint Gregory. Everyone has evidence, none of it verifiable, and every transaction becomes a subtle commentary on loyalty, faith, and taste. Family conversations are equally charged. Over meals, relatives debate passionately. Rome has authority over the West, but Constantinople guides the East. Someone counters with a discussion of liturgical language, while another brings up an obscure council meeting from decades ago. Arguments escalate quickly, occasionally interrupted by a dramatic flourish involving a rolling bread loaf or a misplaced goblet. You nod politely, take careful notes, and ensure that your own opinions are safely neutral, lest a sharp-tongued cousin question your loyalty. Churches are arenas for a more formal performance. Priests deliver sermons with an urgency fueled by anxiety, waving hands, icons, and occasionally a small relic for emphasis. Congregants shout back, protest, and gesture, creating a chaotic symphony of sound. If you attend, you learn quickly to follow cues, nod appropriately, and avoid looking like you disagree, because disagreement here is less of a debate and more of a public hazard. Street corners are no safer. Philosophers, theologians, and amateur scholars gather to debate loudly, often escalating minor points into full-scale verbal battles. A question about the correct method of blessing bread can spiral into a 3-hour discussion about papal authority, original sin, and whether a goat could be excommunicated if it grazes too close to a consecrated altar. You sidestep, duck, and occasionally contribute a vague murmur of agreement to avoid being dragged into the fray. Meanwhile, news spreads like wildfire. A letter from Rome arrives, claiming authority over distant provinces, sparking new debates and angry proclamations. Merchants revise their statements about which city is correct, and even street performers join in, creating puppet plays that satirize bishops, emperors, and, regrettably, innocent cheesemongers. Every citizen becomes an expert, a critic, and a potential victim of rumor simultaneously. By mid-afternoon, the cheese shortage is undeniable. Vendors plead for calm, but the city's anxiety escalates alongside dairy scarcity. People argue not only over theology, but also over who gets the last morsel. The combination of spiritual tension and culinary desperation creates a uniquely Byzantine cocktail of stress, indignation, and minor chaos. Despite the turmoil, there are moments of absurdity. Someone laughs at a misinterpreted proclamation. A child waves a small wheel of cheese as if it were a sacred relic, and pigeons occasionally swoop down, unbothered by human debate. You watch, balancing fascination and apprehension, aware that living through a schism is as much about endurance and diplomacy as it is about faith. By evening, tempers calm slightly. The letters are read, the sermons end, and the last bits of cheese are cautiously rationed. Citizens retreat to their homes, exhausted, hungry, and secretly relieved that the disputes will continue tomorrow. Because in Constantinople, every day brings a new chance for argument, insight, and the occasional pastry-related excommunication. The Great Schism is part religion, part politics, and entirely a test of patience. Surviving it requires diplomacy, awareness, and the ability to navigate chaos while keeping your cheese and dignity intact. You dream of travel, but you'll settle for buying some silk from a Persian merchant who swears it's not haunted. Ferries across the Bosphorus are crowded, overpriced, and possibly captained by pirates. The city is alive with movement, and the promise of trade is constant. Silk, spices, and rare goods arrive from distant lands, carried by merchants who are equal parts salesman and storyteller. You wander through the marketplace, weaving between stalls, inhaling the scents of exotic herbs, pickled fish, and unfamiliar spices. The Persian merchant catches your eye, holding a bolt of shimmering silk that he insists is entirely free of ghosts, curses, or political subtext. You nod politely, pretending to examine it while mentally calculating how many coins you can spare without risking bankruptcy or mild public humiliation. Ferries across the Bosphorus are the next challenge. They are crowded beyond reason, with merchants, travelers, animals, and luggage all vying for balance and space. The captain shouts orders over the wind, though whether he's directing the crew or performing an elaborate pirate-themed monologue is unclear. You clutch your possessions, wary of sudden waves, the occasional drunken sailor, or the possibility that a goat has stowed away for the ride. The smell of salt water mixes with perspiration, fish, and an indefinable odor that can only be described as chaotic maritime adventure. Once aboard, the journey is a delicate negotiation of space, weight, and social cues. You adjust your position to avoid stepping on anyone's toes, or worse, being stepped on. Merchants bargain over cargo placement while loudly debating the quality of imported silk versus locally woven cloth. Children dart between benches, chasing pigeons that have somehow boarded the ferry, adding further complexity. A stray cat prowls the deck, its eyes calculating your worth as either meal or obstacle. You survive by observation, caution, and subtle adjustments of your posture. Upon disembarking, the city's toll collectors demand attention. These officials are intimidating, authoritative, and occasionally unreasonable. One approaches, clipboard in hand, and inspects your belongings with a mixture of suspicion and barely concealed glee. He asks questions, counts coins, and occasionally makes remarks that are only half intelligible. A minor misstep, a hesitation, a mispronounced city name, or a crooked glance can result in an additional fee, a lecture, or a prolonged delay while he debates the proper classification of your wares with a colleague. You nod, comply, and hope that your careful preparation satisfies both law and personal pride. Travel overland brings its own hazards. Streets are crowded with carts, animals, and fellow pedestrians navigating narrow passages. A merchant caravan might include camels carrying spices, horses hauling textiles, or occasionally a goat whose ambition outweighs its loyalty. You dodge carts, sidestep puddles, and maneuver around minor disputes over road precedence, all while maintaining a facade of calm competence. Every step requires awareness, balance, and the occasional apology for the accidental bump or spilt goods. Along the Silk Road, trade is both opportunity and chaos. You encounter goods from China, India, Persia, and distant provinces, each with a story, a price, and an aura of risk. A vendor insists that his spices are blessed by monks, another swears that his silk is unhaunted. You weigh options carefully, balancing curiosity, budget, and the probability that your purchases will survive the journey home. Bartering becomes a performance, requiring subtle gestures, strategic nods, and an ability to convey interest without overcommitting. By evening, you are weary, laden with purchases, and slightly overwhelmed by both the city's commerce and its hazards. You reflect on the complexity, energy, and occasional absurdity of trade and travel in Constantinople. Every ferry, every toll collector, and every market stall is both a challenge and a story, reminding you that life here requires vigilance, creativity, and a strong sense of humor. Trade and travel in Constantinople are lessons in patience, negotiation, and survival. You leave the docks tired, exhilarated, and slightly richer, or at least more experienced than when you arrived. For reasons you don't understand, you've just been crowned emperor. The hat is heavy. The curse is real. And your cousin is already plotting your downfall. Hope you didn't make any enemies at lunch. Becoming emperor, even for a single day, is simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. The crown itself is a physical burden, heavy with gold, jewels, and centuries of symbolic weight. You feel every ounce pressing down on your head, reminding you that authority is both a privilege and an inescapable responsibility. Sitting on the throne is no lighter. The marble is cold, rigid, and unforgiving. A constant reminder that comfort is a luxury for the weak, or, more accurately, for anyone who isn't temporarily in your shoes. Courtiers surround you immediately. They bow, nod, and offer advice that is simultaneously urgent and contradictory. One whispers about a potential invasion, another about mismanaged tax receipts, and a third hints that the city's grain supply is insufficient unless someone performs a minor miracle. You nod politely, hoping your face conveys wisdom while your mind calculates the probability of surviving the day without immediate assassination. Your cousin is not subtle. He smiles, congratulates you, and then murmurs under his breath about a minor adjustment to the laws that would make your reign inconvenient. You've barely digested lunch when you realize that every choice you make is now scrutinized for both merit and potential scandal. Eating a slice of bread too slowly, drinking too quickly from a goblet, or even glancing at the wrong official could be interpreted as arrogance, or worse, treason. The curse, which you learn about only gradually, is no joke. Misfortune seems to follow you with precision. A servant spills wine, a candle flickers dangerously, and a minor earthquake shakes the palace floor. Advisors whisper superstitiously about ill omens, ghosts of past emperors, and the peculiar behavior of palace cats. You begin to suspect that the curse is either real, metaphorical, or a practical joke orchestrated by someone with impeccable timing. Daily tasks are overwhelming. You must inspect the city's defenses, approve trade deals, listen to grievances, and adjudicate disputes. Every decision carries potential consequences. Make a small mistake, and someone loses a vineyard or an ox. Make a bigger one, and someone loses their life, and possibly yours. Even ceremonial duties are perilous. Walking through the halls requires careful observation of where you step, whom you acknowledge, and whether your robe catches a chandelier or a decorative spear. Assassination attempts are surprisingly subtle. A suspicious handshake, a poorly tied sandal strap, or a minor miscommunication in the council chamber can escalate into plots, betrayals, and whispered accusations. You learn quickly to interpret gestures, expressions, and even the tone of coughs for potential danger. Trust is nearly impossible. Vigilance is mandatory. Religious and social obligations continue to pile up. The patriarch requests an audience, claiming the divine favors certain decrees. Nobles argue about tax reforms, trade rights, and seating arrangements for a feast you may or may not attend. Meanwhile, a messenger insists that someone outside the city is threatening rebellion. Every moment is a balancing act of diplomacy, timing, and subtle intimidation. By mid-afternoon, fatigue sets in. The crown feels heavier, the curse more real, and the city's gossip louder than ever. You realize that surviving this day is less about skill and more about endurance, improvisation, and the ability to smile convincingly while mentally cataloguing potential enemies. Evening brings no relief. The city remains alert, the palace still tense, and your cousin's plots continue to multiply. You've eaten, decreed, and survived near disasters, but the real test is lasting until bedtime without losing dignity, property, or life. Being emperor, even for a day, is simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. It teaches humility, patience, and the remarkable skill of keeping one eye open while pretending the other is closed. You leave the throne exhausted, wary, and oddly proud. The city endures, and so do you. At least for now. At last, you settle in for the night. There are prayers, a lot of sighing, and a deep sense of relief that you survived another day in the world's strangest, most persistent empire. Tomorrow, it all begins again, assuming the walls hold. The evening air is cooler, carrying faint scents of incense, roasted bread, and the distant salt of the sea. You pause at the threshold of your home, listening to the city's fading bustle. Merchants close their stalls, guards patrol a little less aggressively, and a few lingering children scuttle toward their homes, squealing with the energy of unresolved adventures. The chaos softens but never disappears entirely. Even at night, Constantinople hums with life, reminding you that rest is a temporary, precious luxury. You light a candle and set it carefully on a small table. Its flickering light casts shadows that dance across your walls, reminding you simultaneously of the city's beauty and its unpredictability. Every flame is a small beacon in the darkness, a fragile assertion of order amidst chaos. You breathe deeply, appreciating this small moment of quiet. The day's events, street disputes, market bartering, narrowly avoided pickpockets, and encounters with goats that defy logic settle into your memory, forming a tapestry of survival, absurdity, and minor victories. Prayer begins. You bow your head, cross yourself, and offer thanks to saints, ancestors, and a vaguely defined higher power for seeing you through the day. You pray for safety, for health, for your neighbors, and for a small miracle that tomorrow's stew will be edible. The prayers are both ritual and comfort, a bridge between the city's unpredictability and the hope that the night brings reprieve. Each uttered phrase is a small act of reassurance, a mental reset, and a nod to the persistence of human faith even in chaotic circumstances. Old wounds ache as you settle onto your straw-filled mattress. Perhaps it's the minor scrapes from navigating uneven streets, a bump from an aggressive goat, or the lingering fatigue from dodging a cart near the docks. Each twinge is a reminder of the city's vibrancy and its hazards. You press a hand to your side, adjust a blanket, and reflect on the resilience required to survive both the physical and social landscapes of Constantinople. These aches are badges of experience, proof that you participated fully in the city's relentless rhythm. You count your blessings carefully: shelter, food, surviving encounters with pickpockets and pigeons, small kindnesses from neighbors, and even the occasional humor found in unexpected mishaps, all are victories of varying significance. Each minor success, whether avoiding a dispute or retrieving a loaf of bread from a particularly persistent goat, contributes to the sense that life, despite its absurdity and danger, is navigable with patience, wits, and a little luck. The city outside is quieter now, but not silent. You hear distant guards calling shifts, the faint ripple of water along the aqueducts, and the occasional clatter of an animal, goat, cat, or pigeon moving through the streets. These sounds, once a source of tension, now become part of the nocturnal symphony that lulls you toward rest. You recognize that while the city never truly sleeps, it does provide pauses, moments of reflection, and opportunities to regain strength. You adjust your blankets, sigh once more, and allow your mind to drift over the day's events. The markets, streets, and courtly intrigues blend into a sequence of challenges and minor triumphs. You reflect on what you learned, what you survived, and how each interaction, whether with neighbor, merchant, or animal, contributed to your endurance. Gratitude, subtle and pervasive, fills the spaces between aches, prayers, and candlelight. As you close your eyes, you imagine tomorrow's sunrise, another day of bustling streets, merchant haggling, the occasional goat rebellion, and the endless rhythm of life in the empire. Sleep begins to claim you, and the city hums around you, persistent, vibrant, and demanding attention. You have survived. You are resilient. And in this moment, that is enough. Water in Constantinople is both a marvel and a menace. The city's aqueducts are feats of engineering, until a pipe bursts and you find yourself bathing in someone else's disaster. Drinking water comes from vast underground cisterns, but every gulp is a gamble. Will it quench your thirst, or just give you something to complain about at lunch? The aqueducts are the first indication that Constantinople is a city of both ingenuity and occasional peril. Stone arches stretch across valleys and hills, channeling water from distant springs into the city. The engineering is impressive, precise, and, on a good day, life-sustaining. On a bad day, a sudden leak can flood streets, soak unsuspecting pedestrians, and leave you questioning whether the ancient builders were attempting subtle humor. You walk carefully beneath these monumental structures, aware that a stray drop could escalate into a mini-disaster, soaking your shoes, trousers, and dignity in equal measure. Cisterns hidden beneath the city provide drinking water to thousands. Entering one is like stepping into a cathedral of damp stone and echoing drips. You lower a bucket, listening to the splash and praying the rope holds. Every lift is accompanied by cautious optimism. Will the water taste fresh? Or will it remind you that Constantinople's plumbing has priorities slightly different from yours? You sip cautiously, tasting the faint hint of minerals and the faint whisper of other city residents' laundry. Even the cisterns, impressive as they are, demand vigilance. Fountains dot the city, offering both aesthetic pleasure and hydration. Citizens queue, fill vessels, and occasionally engage in minor arguments over whose turn it is. You approach politely, careful not to jostle anyone or spill your water. A small child bumps into your legs, sending droplets flying, and you remember that public water is as much a social challenge as it is a necessity. You drink carefully, aware that misjudging the container could result in minor embarrassment or the ire of someone nearby. Household storage is a challenge of its own. Barrels, jugs, and basins must be filled, managed, and protected from contamination. A misplaced lid or inattentive neighbor can introduce unwelcome additions to the supply. You treat each container with care, using what you need, and constantly assessing whether it is potable, questionable, or a potential plot by someone who enjoys mild chaos. Water in Constantinople demands attention, patience, and occasional superstition. Public baths amplify both the marvel and menace of the city's water. Pools, tepid rooms, and caldaria rely on steady aqueduct input. The water is heated, circulated, and shared among dozens of citizens. You step in cautiously, mindful of prior bathers, slippery floors, and the occasional child or goat wandering too close. Every splash is a reminder that even life's essential elements are unpredictable here. Rainwater provides a temporary reprieve, but only for those who collect and store it properly. Barrels catch droplets, but improper lids or cracks invite mosquitoes, debris, and the occasional dubious substance. You check carefully, ensuring that your small reservoir is safe, or at least marginally better than nothing. Even this solution carries risk. Mosquitoes may bite, barrels may spill, and neighbors may loudly comment on your improvised system. By evening, water has taught you lessons in vigilance, adaptability, and patience. Aqueducts, cisterns, fountains, and barrels, each present challenges, rewards, and occasional mishaps. Every sip, every dip, and every bath is both a practical necessity and a reminder of the city's practical complexity. In Constantinople, water is more than a utility. It is a reflection of ingenuity, risk, and human persistence. Each successful gulp, carefully navigated bath, and managed reservoir is a small victory. Proof that survival is possible even in the midst of engineering marvels and occasional chaos. Everywhere you turn, someone's demanding a fee. Market taxes, bridge tolls, and a mysterious window tax that seems to increase every time you open a shutter. You pay them all, grumbling, because the alternative is an appointment with the city's least sympathetic bureaucrat and his friend, the lead-weighted ledger. Taxes in Constantinople are omnipresent. From the moment you leave your home, you are reminded of the city's fiscal appetite. Merchants levy small fees for using their stalls. Bridge tolls are collected by grim-faced officials who seem to derive pleasure from your discomfort. And then there are the strange, vaguely named levies. A tax for lighting a lamp, a tax for having a window, and the occasional miscellaneous city service fee that nobody can fully explain. Every coin handed over is a negotiation, a surrender, and a test of patience. Market taxes are immediate and unavoidable. Vendors shout prices that seem reasonable until an inspector appears, insisting that every item be accounted for. You open your pouch and hand over coins while trying not to let frustration show. Merchants shrug, clerks frown, and nearby citizens whisper rumors about past offenders. You move on, lighter in coin but with a deepening appreciation for bureaucratic creativity. Bridge tolls are another ritual of the city. Each crossing requires payment, inspection, and occasionally a lecture. You hand over coins, adjust your tunic, and smile politely while a toll collector examines the strap on your bag, the angle of your sandals, and the expression on your face. Crossing without paying is considered risky, especially when the collector's friends are lurking nearby, ready to record your infraction in their lead-weighted ledger. You comply, muttering under your breath about fairness, fate, and the strange economics of ancient urban life. Household taxes add complexity. The so-called window tax is particularly insidious. Every shuttered or open window seems to invite a small fee. calculated by unseen clerks who apparently have nothing better to do. You open your shutters for sunlight and pay the price. You close them to conserve warmth and pay again. Each coin removed from your pouch is a small reminder of the city's constant appetite and your limited resources. Visiting the tax office is a high-risk exercise in endurance and diplomacy. Clerks inspect ledgers, question minor expenditures, and occasionally add new fees without explanation. You nod politely, maintain a posture of humility, and quietly calculate what you owe, what you can afford, and whether your neighbor might serve as a scapegoat for minor discrepancies. Every interaction carries the possibility of additional fines or public embarrassment. So, careful observation and strategic deference are key survival skills. Sometimes, taxes and tolls intersect with city life in unexpected ways. A late market inspection can coincide with a bridge toll, forcing you to navigate both simultaneously. Children dart through alleys, goats wander into collection points, and pigeons inspect your coin pouch with curiosity. You adapt, paying what is required, while mentally noting that survival in Constantinople requires both flexibility and endurance. By evening, you are lighter in coin, heavier in experience, and slightly more wary of every official glance. You reflect on the relentless cycle: fees collected, coins surrendered, and bureaucrats satisfied. Life in the city teaches that wealth is fleeting, patience is essential, and a sense of humor is critical. Taxes and tolls in Constantinople are more than fiscal instruments. They are social lessons, endurance tests, and reminders that certainty is rare. You may be poorer than yesterday, but at least you've survived the day's audits, tolls, and inspections with your dignity mostly intact. If you're lucky, you get sent to school, where you learn your letters by reciting Homer and dodging the occasional flying wax tablet. Education is a privilege, but also an endurance sport. Your teacher is equal parts philosopher and professional yeller. If you can pronounce all the emperor's names without crying, you get to graduate. School in Constantinople is an experience that combines intellectual rigor with a healthy dose of physical hazard. Classrooms are often small, crowded, and poorly ventilated, with long benches carved from rough wood that test your balance and patience. Wax tablets, pens, and inkwells dominate every desk, and the smell of ink mingles with dust, sweat, and the occasional stray goat wandering in from the street. You settle in, hoping that today you'll survive without a bruised elbow or an unintended lesson in humility. The teacher is the central figure in this educational theatre. Equal parts philosopher, disciplinarian, and occasional demagogue, he demands attention, precision, and effort. Every recitation is judged for volume, accuracy, and enthusiasm. Miss a syllable in Homer, and the stylus may come flying, not maliciously, but certainly with intent to intimidate. You duck, take a deep breath, and continue, aware that survival in school is a matter of both intelligence and agility. Greek grammar and vocabulary are exercises in endurance. Letters and words stretch endlessly across wax tablets, each one more difficult to pronounce than the last. You stumble over names of emperors, minor saints, and obscure city officials, eliciting gasps or exasperated sighs from classmates. Repetition is constant, persistence is mandatory, tears are optional, though common. Success is measured in correct recitation, steady hands, and an ability to withstand minor humiliation. Beyond, language, arithmetic, history, and rhetoric are taught with equal intensity. You calculate taxes, memorize lineages, and debate hypothetical philosophical questions, all while dodging flying objects and verbal rebukes. The lessons are designed not only to educate, but also to cultivate endurance, focus, and a tolerance for chaos. Each correct answer earns approval, Each mistake triggers commentary that oscillates between instruction and dramatic critique. School is also social theatre. Classmates compete for favor, position, and survival. Alliances are formed, whispers exchanged, and minor pranks executed, all while the teacher maintains an air of constant supervision. You navigate this environment carefully, balancing collaboration with caution, humor with respect, and curiosity with the constant awareness that failure can be both public and prolonged. Occasionally, practical exercises take the form of writing letters, reciting poetry, or interpreting historical texts. Wax tablets become both medium and hazard, as careless hands result in smudged ink or minor injuries. You learn precision, patience, and the importance of observing both materials and peers carefully. Success requires coordination of thought, hand, and social awareness. By the end of the day, your tongue is sore from Greek, your hands tired from stylus work, and your mind buzzing with knowledge both practical and abstract. You have survived the classroom, dodged minor injuries, and demonstrated sufficient comprehension to avoid additional punishment. Education in Constantinople is rigorous, chaotic, and slightly terrifying, but it also produces resilience, skill, and the foundation for navigating a city as complex as this one. School is not merely about literacy, it is training for life. Every lesson teaches endurance, observation, and adaptability. You leave with ink-stained hands, a sharper mind, and the quiet knowledge that surviving Constantinople's schools is preparation for the unpredictable world beyond the classroom. The empire is a hotbed of superstition. Everyone wears at least 3 amulets, and the local apothecary has a spell for everything, especially if you've been cursed by a neighbor's evil eye. Did your bread fall butter side down? That's bad luck until you walk backwards around a statue of Theodora. Twice. Superstition in Constantinople is woven into every corner of life. People carry charms, talismans, and miniature icons, each promising protection, prosperity, or the faint hope that nothing catastrophic will happen before breakfast. You notice citizens adjusting necklaces, touching rings, or muttering brief incantations while navigating crowded streets, all while carefully avoiding unlucky cracks, shadows, or the gaze of suspicious pigeons. The city's energy is a mix of fear, ritual, and quiet optimism, an ongoing negotiation with forces unseen. Amulets are everywhere: bronze medallions, carved stones, tiny bells, and pieces of string knotted in intricate patterns hang from belts, necks, and even the corners of carts. Some are blessed by priests, others purchased from street vendors with a suspicious flair for theatrics. Each is believed to ward off disease, misfortune, or the occasional overly curious goat. You adjust your own amulets carefully, hoping that quantity compensates for your limited magical knowledge, and that a small prayer whispered under your breath will reinforce their effect. The apothecary is both a shop and a spiritual center. Herbs, powders, and miniature vials line shelves, each labeled with vague instructions and dramatic warnings. A particularly helpful woman behind the counter swears she can cure a minor curse, reverse a hex, and neutralize an evil eye, all while preparing a small potion that smells faintly like burnt onions. You purchase a vial, nod politely, and promise to follow instructions exactly, knowing full well that forgetting any step might result in minor disaster, or at least curious stares from neighbors. Bad luck is measured in everyday mishaps. A dropped coin, a stubbed toe, or, as mentioned, bread falling butter side down, can trigger elaborate rituals. Walking backward around statues, touching specific stones, or tossing a pinch of salt over your shoulder are standard remedies. You perform these actions carefully, aware that proper procedure is as important as belief itself. Failure to complete the ritual accurately could compound the misfortune. Neighbors contribute actively to superstition. One may whisper that a black cat sneezing in the street signals disaster. Another insists that spilling water onto a doorstep invites divine retribution. Conversations revolve around minor events, interpreted as omens, and the resulting advice is often dramatic, repetitive, and occasionally contradictory. You nod, follow instructions, and carry a small amount of salt in your pocket, just in case. Superstition extends into public spaces. Markets, temples, and even bathhouses are punctuated with rituals, prayers, and protective gestures. Merchants sprinkle water, display charms, and arrange goods to avoid attracting misfortune. Citizens adjust clothing, step cautiously, and consult amulets before making purchases or announcements. Every act, from greeting a friend to negotiating for goods, carries subtle layers of precaution. By the end of the day, superstition has guided your movements, influenced your purchases, and shaped your interactions. You have walked backward around statues, muttered prayers, and consulted talismans, all while navigating the practical realities of the city. The line between precaution, ritual, and paranoia blurs, but somehow, life continues. In Constantinople, superstition is a survival tool, a cultural practice, and a shared language. It provides reassurance, creates community, and teaches vigilance, adaptability, and patience. Each charm, ritual, and whispered warning is a reminder that the city is as much about unseen forces as it is about stone, water, and people. Romance in the Eastern Roman Empire is less candlelit dinners, more negotiation over goats and property deeds. Marriages are arranged, dowries debated, and if you actually like your spouse, it's considered a minor miracle. Your in-laws will remind you that true love is fine, but a well-negotiated dowry lasts forever. If you thought love in Constantinople was about secret trysts and stolen glances under moonlit colonnades, you're in for a reality check and a lengthy debate about the value of 3 sheep and a moderately productive olive grove. Courtship, such as it is, often begins with a family council, a stack of property records, and a subtle arms race of who can bring the most impressive cheese to the negotiation table. The ideal outcome isn't butterflies in your stomach, it's butterflies in your father's ledger as the numbers add up in your favor. Weddings are events, yes, but not necessarily romantic ones. A formal proposal is a matter of paperwork, social status, and public announcements. Families gather, whisper, and exchange gifts, sometimes as symbolic as a handful of figs, sometimes as serious as a deed to a vineyard. The negotiation is tactical, with mothers, uncles, and concerned friends weighing in on everything from the size of the dowry to the moral fortitude of the groom's second cousin twice removed. Emotions, if present, are wrapped tightly under layers of courtesy, calculation, and the faint aroma of legal parchment. Dowries are everything. They're a family's honor, a young woman's bargaining chip, and a surefire way to spark jealousy in neighbors for decades. The contents are scrutinized. Land, livestock, household goods, cash if you're lucky. And don't forget the all-important promise of future returns, which everyone pretends to understand, but no one intends to enforce. Dowries are tracked obsessively. Did Aunt Euphemia get more gold than her sister? Will young Alexios inherit 2 goats or 3? The ledger never lies, but it often causes family reunions to devolve into light shouting matches. If actual affection grows between spouses, it's usually by accident, or through years of enduring the same in-laws and arguing over the best time to plant beans. Public displays of affection are discouraged. If you so much as hold hands in public, an old woman will clutch her pearls, a priest will sigh, and a passing philosopher will deliver a lecture about modesty. Behind closed doors, affection is quieter. an extra fig in your partner's bowl, a freshly mended tunic, or not mentioning their habit of snoring like a startled ox. Married life, of course, means new family. In-laws are ever present, offering opinions, stories of their own wedding days. Spoiler: the dowry was always better in the old days, and unsolicited advice about everything from parenting to the correct arrangement of icons on your bedroom wall. Their wisdom is endless, as is their ability to show up right after an argument, just in time to critique your household management and offer to help rearrange the pantry. Yet, for all the cynicism, marriage is also partnership. Two people navigating Byzantine bureaucracy, dodging taxes, and collaborating on family feasts. Over time, fondness may blossom, hidden in small acts of care, shared jokes, or joint survival of your aunt's infamous boiled cabbage recipe. A good marriage, you learn, is built less on grand declarations and more on surviving together, laughing at disasters, and remembering to check the cheese before serving it to your in-laws. So, if you find love, celebrate. But don't forget to keep the property deeds in a safe place. In Constantinople, a well-negotiated dowry is more enduring than any love poem, and it comes with fewer arguments over goats. And now, as the candles flicker, and the city of Constantinople quiets to a gentle hum, it's time to let your mind settle. Tonight, we've wandered through streets, layered with history, dust, and the occasional misbehaving goat. We've glimpsed the chaos of daily life, the stench of garum, the thrum of chariot races, the whispers of imperial intrigue. And yet, somehow, life carried on. The people of the Eastern Roman Empire endured, adapted, and even thrived amid a world that would make a modern human collapse at the first sign of trouble. Think of the bakers who woke before dawn, kneading dough while dodging carts and pigeons. Remember the scribes counting coins and copying texts by candlelight, aware that one misstep could ruin not only their day, but possibly their lives. Imagine the soldiers, exhausted and frostbitten, patrolling city walls, the echoes of past emperors and future invaders pressing upon them. Every day demanded resilience, resourcefulness, and a remarkable amount of patience with one another. So tonight, as you tuck into your soft bed with running water, a warm drink, and a closet free from rats and unsolicited philosophical debates, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to those who came before you, the ones who survived lice, leeches, bureaucrats, and cities that never slept. Because history may be messy, gross, and terrifying, but it is also a testament to human stubbornness, hope, and occasional absurdity. Let your body sink into your mattress. Let your breathing slow, and let the stories of emperors, merchants, and ordinary people fade gently into the rhythm of your own heartbeat. You are safe. You are warm. And for a moment, you are connected across time to those who lived, laughed, argued, and persevered in the Eastern Roman Empire. Sleep now, gently and deeply, and carry a little of their resilience into your dreams.